for you to also give it to my Quran teacher from when I was a child. And the British say to Iqbal that we don't know who your teacher is from when you were a child. Can you tell us a little bit about him? What has he written? What are his books? And Iqbal says to them that I am his book. You want to be able to recognize the reality of an individual like Allama Iqbal is not a product of something that comes from nothing. But to have somebody who is not simply so celebrated as an academic, as a scholar, as so much more, but also somebody who, in the face of a circumstance that would leave many of us to be in a place where we acquiesce to whatever it is that they are telling us. That the honor of Iqbal is not that he was given knighthood, but when a governmental apparatus seeks to award him for his credentials, he stands firm in his identity as a Muslim and says that if you were to honor me, you need to honor the one that instilled a sense of honor in me in the first place. He doesn't leave his religion at the door, but he sees it as an integral part of who he is. And it's something that's shaped based off of who surrounded him as a young person. Do you understand what I'm saying? When we think about the development of young people in our lives, and you look at the beautiful example of the beloved of Allah, sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam, and how it was that he shaped young people with an air of empowerment, gave them courage, a sense that they could belong and contribute to society. The manner and mode in which he engaged them was not any distinct from how he engaged most of creation to begin with. Al-Bara radiallahu anh, he tells us in a hadith that you can find in Al-Adab al-Mufrad that on one occasion he hears the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam as he is walking with his grandson on his shoulders, and he is making dua to Allah that, Ya Allah, love him as I love him. And if we can understand that Al-Bara radiallahu anh heard the Prophet say that he loves his grandson, and you and I, 14 centuries later, know definitively that the Prophet ﷺ said that he loved his grandson, then definitely the grandson of the Prophet of God both knew and heard that his grandfather loved him. It wasn't left to assumption. It was something that was there, and it was there in the most direct of ways. The conversations that we are having tonight are ones that are about us creating now a sense of courage within our young people. In a world, a society that is not shaped and fashioned to be able to bring people of distinct, diverse backgrounds and quite often tell us that we are only accepted when we become that which we are not. Necessitates with that much more deliberation for us to have strategy that shapes now for a young person key interactions with individuals that adopt a pedagogy rooted in our religious tradition, motivated by values of real compassion, mercy, and love. And there's so much that we have built already that is remarkable, that so many of you play a critical role in contributing to. My grandfathers were both 6'4", tall, strong Punjabi Kashmiri men. My grandmothers, they were both 4'10", and you could tell what side of the gene pool I landed on. And I went to visit my father's home that he grew up in after partition in a part of Lahore called Gwal Mandi. And the house that my father grew up in Gwal Mandi, it was probably from where this wall starts to where these brothers are sitting, and 2 rooms, the width of perhaps from that window to that window. My grandfather used to ride a bike every day to work. And then he would come home and he would have his children, my father and his siblings, sit outside of their house under a street lamp to study because they had no electricity in their house. And before I end that anecdote, I want you to understand purpose of our religion is not simply limited to worship. The Quran, it says, إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ, that we were made to worship. That's there. But it talks about so many other reasons as to why we were made. It speaks about istimar, the cultivation of civilization, beauty, the arts, civility. That is not by chance that the Prophet ﷺ's prophethood ends in the establishment of a Medina. It speaks about ibtila, the need to have a growth mindset, that the I that is me today is not afraid to meet the one that I can be tomorrow. But it also speaks about istikhlaf, to be khalifa. And it's quite often translated as a steward, a caretaker of the earth, which it is. But you're also khalifa because what comes next. That my 7-year-old son Kareem, my 9-year-old daughter Medina, they're khalaf to me. And I'm salaf to them because I'm what precedes them. And in the spirit of istikhlaf, a recognition of my grandfather and my grandfather's grandfather and so on and so forth, individuals who lived under such dire straits. The realities of colonization, of imperialism, of partition, of slavery. Things that they experienced based off of others coming and telling them that who they were was not good enough. I can't imagine that my Kashmiri grandfather would ever think that this many Muslims would be sitting in the city of Chicago in a masjid as beautiful as this, gatherings that the angels descend into. May Allah make us from amongst those gatherings. When he was living in that moment, riding that bike. And the need to be able to give continuity to it now is so that we can understand the struggles that you went through were not in vain. And what you did to build beautiful spaces like this now require us, as we move forward, as what comes next, to bear upon what was already founded. And as you have built amazing buildings, we build now amazing individuals to fill them. Programs and projects, things that instill a sense of courage and invigoration. That starts from a place that says that these young people need to have an identity that shapes them to even be bold enough to take that route. My father, he's a doctor. He studied at King Edward's in Lahore. And he came here in the 70s at a time where this country was seeking to inflate its rankings in numerous fields, and it opened up its visa processes and residency statuses to many people of different cultures around the world. My father lived in Arizona, he lived in Boston, he lived in Brooklyn, he lived in Queens, he even lived in Chicago before he settled in New Jersey, where I was born. Came from a similar cultural background to many of you. And when people ask me how it is that I am going down the path that I go down, and I can talk to them about degrees and credentials and all of these kinds of things. But I'll share with you an example of what really helps me to feel as if I can take on whatever this world throws at me. I was one day invited to speak at a university in New Jersey where my parents live. There was maybe 400 or 500 people sitting in the audience, and right in the front row was my mother and father. And at the end of the program, I went to their home to have a meal with them. And then as I left to move on to the next thing that was drawing all of my attention, my elderly father, Pakistani, Kashmiri, Punjabi man, walked to the door and said to me, "Khalid, hold on for a second." And so I stood and listened to my dad, and I said, "Abu, what can I do for you?" And he came close to me, put his hands on my shoulders, kissed me on the top of my forehead, and he said, "You spoke very well tonight. I want you to know I'm very proud of you. Any awards that I've ever received in my life, any people who are well known. I've shared stages with people like the Pope and the Dalai Lama, met with the president a bunch of times, been on the cover of Newsweek magazine, interviewed by all kinds of people. None of it even came close to what that one kiss from my father and the fact that he was proud of me and told me he was proud of me did in terms of energy. You can't undermine the role that you play in the next generation, being from amongst those who 50 years from now are going to sit where you are seated. And in order to be in a place where they benefit from all of the work that you have done, you ensure that as you continue to build a community, you fill it now with people who will be actually worthy of taking care of your children. And so leadership has to reflect the needs and dynamics of the people that will step up. Those who are here and grow up here and are brought up here will need those who will provide for them that understand the realities of this space. Individuals that will graduate from institutions that are based in learning our traditions, such as Bayan, that will formulate a curriculum that will allow for people that understand, rooted in authentic learning, how it is that you deal with the challenges of being in this part of the world and growing up in it. And the work that I'm blessed to do at New York University, I have 3,000 Muslim students, some of them that come from your masjid. There are as many people who live and work in the surrounding area that come to our center. Altogether, we serve about 10 to 12,000 people. And a lot of them, they're just in a place where they struggle. They have a lot of anxiety. They deal with depression. They're trying to figure out just how to belong and fit in. That their sense of self is not just rooted in the successes that are worldly, but they're trying to make sense of so much more. And what we're able to provide for them is a space that allows for them to still build a deep relationship with Allah, but take that understanding and then go out into a world where they don't have to leave their religious identity behind. Many of them that have their struggles rooted in challenges that come from family. A lot of them wished that the elders in their lives expressed love towards them and affection. A lot of them wished that the masjids that they went to taught them how to be Muslim in this world. That they weren't just bombarded with conversations and lectures and khutbahs that were just about telling them everything that they did that was wrong and why they're a problem and how their entire existence is haram. And the healing that they're in need of necessitates an understanding that they weren't privy to so much that the young people heard from the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If you walk away with anything from tonight, you want to ensure first institutionally the people that you give the privilege of serving the community are those that are not just going to serve in the immediate, but will serve in terms of those that will be here generations after. And beyond anything that might come from the mimbar, the most key component of identity development for the young people in this community is going to be based off of what it is that they are brought up with outside of these spaces and in their homes. Don't wait for the day of Eid to hug the young people in your life. Hug them every single day. Don't tell them only where it is that they make mistakes and express to them why it is that they have shortcomings. If you have to do that, then for every one time you do, tell them 5 times more how great it is that you are proud of them. If it's difficult for you to tell them that you love them, I promise you that it'll get easier after the second, the third, the fourth time that you do it. And the one that's going to gain the most is going to be you. Because as amazing as I feel when my father tells me that he's proud of me, I can see how it changes his entire existence that he's able to express that pride and he doesn't have to keep it hidden within himself. You are going to be the most important person in the young people's lives here. Even if they're not your kids, when they walk into this space, you give them salams. When they come and sit down with you, you ask them how they're doing. It's going to be transformational. I guarantee it to you. You have a beautiful masjid. May Allah make it a place of light for all of His creation. You've done an amazing job in being able to build a space that truly serves as a reminder of the divine. Now is the time for us to think about, what is this going to look like 50 years from now? And what are we setting it up for, so that its continuity is not just about the space, but what we're filling the space with and how the space becomes a catalyst for so much more. So from this space, you transform the entire city that you are a part of. And it's Muslims from your community, those that you will leave behind, that are building the clinics, the shelters. They are engaged in so much more of a practical implementation of our faith's values and traditions. And it starts from understanding the critical role we all play in their identity formation. If I can ever be helpful to any of you in anything, please let me know. It would be an honor for me to return some of the hospitality that I have received as I've been in your beautiful city. If this is the only time that we are meant to be together, then I pray inshallah ta'ala, Allah Azza wa Jal gathers us all together again in the best of places in the world beyond this one. But please keep me in your dua. You and your loved ones and your beautiful community will be in mine. Wallahu ta'ala alam wa billahi tawfiq. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuhu.
Imagine you're a 14-year-old Pakistani American kid raised in this country, and you go to high school. In a high school that is predominantly non-Muslim, and the kids there are cruel. And they see that you, although maybe are big in stature, 6'2", a little bit overweight, like a big teddy bear, you're gentle, a gentle soul. And so the kids take advantage of that and they start to pick on you. And they say mean and cruel things, recognizing that you're Muslim, about your Islamic identity. And they do it in front of the teacher, and the teacher doesn't stop them. In fact, the teacher also says something negative about your faith. How would you feel? I had this young boy come into my office when I was the Imam at the Islamic Center of Southern California. He walked into my office, his shoulders were slumped. He was looking downward. He was depressed. And he said, I don't want to go back to school. I don't know what to do. He told me the things that were said. He told me he didn't know how to respond. And I said, okay, we have a couple of options. Option one, you give us the word. We'll go, we'll speak to the principal. We will put on a school, a campus event that will teach about Islam and will prevent bullying, and we'll bring the teacher into the principal's office, and we will back you up 100%. That's option one. I said, or option two. Option two is to understand who's picking on you and why they're picking on you. And understand how to carry yourself in that hostile environment in a way that undermines their effort to bring you down and to build themselves up. Understand their psychology. When they are picking on you, they are going to try and say something to make you feel hurt, and then to recoil. It makes them feel powerful. And when they get other people to laugh, it makes them also of a higher status in that group, because everyone else is thinking, I'm going to laugh at what he's saying about you so that he doesn't direct his meanness at me. And so there's a psychology in the room. What I told him was, you have the power. You have the power to, even if it does hurt, not to show it, to not give him that power, that his words will penetrate into your heart and cause you pain. You can respond to his derision, making fun of you, with a lighthearted spirit. Redirect it. He said people were picking on me and saying something about ISIS or Taliban or something, and I told him, you know what? You probably don't know that much about ISIS or the Taliban, do you? He says, no. I said, but I bet you know 10 times more than he does. So if he brings up one of these topics, instead of showing that you're hurt, instead of allowing his words to cause you that pain and to encourage him to keep going with it, number one, be lighthearted about it. Number two, flip it back on him. If he says something about Taliban, you can say, yeah, the Taliban, what do you think we should do as a country in our policy towards Afghanistan? What do you think we should do regarding the occupation? He's not going to have any clue on how to respond. He's going to feel dumb, because he probably is on that topic at least, and he's not going to pick on you anymore. So the young boy thought about it for a minute, and he said, let me try option 2 first. I didn't see him the next week at the youth group, but I saw him the week after. And when he walked into my office, this 6'2" giant teddy bear of a kid, his shoulders were back, his head was high, and he had a bounce in his step. And he said, I tried option 2 and it worked. No one's giving me a hard time anymore. And he also did the same thing with the teacher. He didn't need anyone's help. What he needed was just some guidance on how to navigate the challenges that he faced. Something his parents couldn't help him do, but something that a youth group, a support group at the masjid could help him overcome. That challenge that this group could help him overcome. And the reason why I started with this story is because the masjid has, as Imam Khalid alluded to, an important role to play in the identity formation of young people, because although this is a spiritual sanctuary, a sacred place where we can have repose, we can retreat from the harshness of the world around us and be reminded of the divine through the angelic voice that we just heard from this young Qari, barakallahu fikum. However, in addition to feeling the inspiration that we do when we're in prayer and listening to the Quran recited, the role of this community, of this institution, is to help provide guidance for young people on how to engage in the world around them. And the only way that will happen is if you have a wonderful school here, and Dr. Habib Qadri is a phenomenal community leader and someone who can play that role. But you also need an imam, a youth director, a chaplain for your institution. And you might say, what is a chaplain? Well, we have one right here. A chaplain is someone who is trained on helping young people develop a well-adjusted identity in who they are, helps them to develop their connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and their spirituality, and helps model for them how to manifest the values of this faith in the world in which we live, and in community, and in service. We have 3,000 masajid in this country. Estimates put the number of Muslims at least at 3.5 million. Sometimes we say 6 million, 7 million, 10 million. Allahu a'lam. We have at least 3.5 million. We have around 3,000 mosques. But less than half of the mosques have an imam. And 90% of the imams that serve in the 1,500 masajid, 90% of them were born, raised, and educated abroad, which means that they might have authentic knowledge about Islam, but it also means that they're hard-pressed to present that knowledge in a way to young people that will be relevant and meaningful, that will include, as an expression of that faith, a blueprint, a map for how to engage civically in the society in which we live, so that the values of this faith are manifest in the clinics, in serving the poor, et cetera, outside the walls of the masjid. In 2009, I was working on my PhD in Islamic Studies at UCLA. I was serving as the Imam of LA's oldest and largest mosque, and I was approached by the president of a 130-year-old Christian seminary. His name is Dr. Jerry Campbell. He came to me and he said, "I need your help." I said, "Okay, how can I help you?" He said, "We have fewer and fewer seminary students who are Christian, who are studying at our august, well-regarded Christian seminary." I said, "Yeah." He said, "The reason why is because in society, the image of religion is negative, not just of Islam, of Christianity. If you ask your average person on the street about religion, they said, oh, religion divides people. It's the source of hatred and bigotry and self-righteousness, war and conflict." He said, "It's my hope that we can reclaim the role of religion in the popular imagination, in the public consciousness, to be perceived as a force that can bring about peace and reconciliation, that can be a positive force in society." And I was listening and I said, "Yeah, how can I help?" He said, "Well, the way that I envision doing that is to partner with a Muslim seminary, a graduate level accredited Muslim seminary that offers accredited master's degrees and doctoral degrees, so that our Christian students can study from the Muslim scholars and learn authentically about Islam, and vice versa, not to convert or to be converted, but rather to understand and identify a common ground upon which we can build a better tomorrow." I said, "That's a beautiful vision. What can I do?" He said, "Well, can you point me in the direction of an accredited Islamic graduate school, Muslim seminary that offers accredited degrees?" I said, "Well, that's easy. This is in 2009, even before Zaytuna, which is undergraduate, or it was at that time." I said, "Well, there doesn't exist any in the United States, let alone in Southern California, but we need one. And I happen to be an academic by training, an imam and a religious leader by experience. I think I can, as a project, we can start an Islamic graduate school, because we need one. We need imams that are trained in this context to be able to more effectively pass on the faith to the next generation. Because back home, whether you're from Indo-Pakistani background, or we're from your Arab background or African or whatever your background is, if you're from a Muslim majority country, you pick up Islam through osmosis. What your kids are picking up here through osmosis is not Islam. And so the way in which you acquired your Islamic identity and your Muslim faith is not the way your children are going to acquire it. And so you need imams that know how to do that, and chaplains and others. And so we started to form the Muslim seminary. It's called Bayan. And we announced it in 2010, and we began our first degree in Islamic Studies and Leadership, a Master's of Arts, in 2011. You've never heard of us before. We don't really market. But, alhamdulillah, we've grown 40% a year for the last 11 years. And we've graduated now 70 imams and chaplains and Islamic school teachers and principals over these last 11 years. And we have about 72 students currently enrolled. And we just announced the launch of a doctoral program in Islamic leadership, a doctorate in ministry in Islamic leadership. And our goal is to be a pipeline to produce leaders and teachers and chaplains to serve the thousands of masajid that we currently have and the 1,000 more that we will be building in the coming years. I always tell the uncles who established the masajid, you have built the hardware. We are now producing the software, the human element that will fill those institutions with a spirit that is well adjusted, rooted in the Islamic tradition, but relevant for the contemporary context, and most equipped to help pass on faith to the next generation. So this is what we're doing here at Bayan, and this is actually what brought Imam Khalid Latif out here, because a number of our students are chaplains, not just for prisons and hospitals in the military, but also universities. There are a growing number of universities, some private, some public, that are hiring Muslim chaplains. Harvard contacted me a few years ago. They said, send us one of your graduates. Stanford contacted me. They said, we need a Muslim chaplain. Princeton, they just lost their beloved Muslim chaplain, Allah yarhamhu, and they were able to find a replacement. But a number of these institutions have them. The Claremont colleges and Rutgers University in New Jersey. There are a number of the thousands of universities that are starting to hire Muslim chaplains. And it's such an important role, because when your kids go off to college, they go one of two directions. Oftentimes when they taste that freedom, if they didn't have it at home, they go off the deep end. They completely lose their sense of self, and they don't have a sense of self-regulation, and then they make terrible mistakes. Sometimes they come back, sometimes they don't. But if they have a strong option, a safe space in which they can explore the meaning of life with the support of others who are encouraging them on the path of al-Islam, then that increases the chance and the possibility of them going down that path. So you might be surprised to hear that even though I transitioned from being the Imam of that masjid in 2011 to becoming the president of Bayan, I still get a lot of phone calls asking, in my role as an Imam, to help with this problem or that problem. The number one request that I get, just as a wake-up call, the number one phone call that I receive, and I've received this phone call over 150 times. Can you marry my Muslim daughter to a non-Muslim man? These are practicing, oftentimes Indo-Pakistani families who, not asking, what do I do? My daughter is engaged to a non-Muslim man. They've given up and they just simply ask, can you officiate the nikah? Which of course we don't do, but that's the question that I get. So it's important that we create opportunities for young people, young boys and young girls, to develop a well-adjusted sense of self, so that when they go out into the world, they know how to navigate and they don't end up in situations like that. Jazakumullah khair for your attention. And I wanted to, if you'll indulge me for a few more minutes, we have until 10:30, I understand, correct? No, I'm just kidding. I wanted to ask a couple of questions from our chaplain Imam here. Is that okay? What time do we have until? What's that? 9 o'clock. So maybe 5 more minutes, if you don't mind. All right. So tell me, if you would, the state of the 3,000 kids when they first come to campus. What is the sort of the spectrum that you experience in terms of their state of iman, their state of identity at NYU, at the Islamic Center there?
Yeah, Bismillah. It's varied, but I think now many Muslim students who are going to universities consider our university because they know that there's an established Islamic center there, and there's numerous accommodations. We have 3 musallas on our campus. Our main Jummah prayer gets, hundreds of people that come to it. We have the only fully halal certified dining hall in the country. The brothers at Hafsa, they certify it. It has 1,600 menu items. an entire convenience store, also certified. We teach numerous programs, halaqat, all kinds of things that you can imagine. They'll have iftars during the week, etc. Those things are in place. But there's also within it an opportunity for them to just voice the struggles that they have, challenges that they're facing, and reconciling where they're at in terms of their faith in relation to just obstacles that come in their way. They go to universities that were not built for people like them, and that's just fundamentally true. Right? When I worked at Princeton University for a year, I was 24 years old. I'm turning 40 next week, inshallah. And the first week that I was at Princeton University, I started to meet people like Cornel West, a well-known academic, activist, amazing intellectual. People like Toni Morrison, a celebrated author who has since passed some time ago. I met somebody who then was part of the original founding teams and establishment of Amazon. They introduced me to somebody and said, this person is directly responsible for the resurgence of China's economy. And in my head, I'm thinking, what am I doing at this place? How do I belong here? And in the second week that I was at Princeton University, I started to get letters from alumni that said, we don't want Muslims at Princeton University. We don't want your Sharia law at Princeton University. Somebody like you should never be at a place like this. One person literally sent me a 400-page book that he wrote, and he said, read this, it'll tell you why you should never be here. When I went to speak to my supervisors, the heads of religious life, and asked them how to respond, their answer to me was that these people are confused, that they were simultaneously to my hiring looking for somebody to fill the position that was the dean of the chapel, the head of religious life. That a man by the name of Tom Brightenthal, who was a really great person, was moving on to become the Archbishop of Southern Ohio, and that his seat was being vacant. And their explanation to me was they're upset because they think we hired you for that position. And I said, well, that's not better, it's worse. Why can't I be the head of the chapel? Because I'm Muslim? And you have to understand fundamentally what these young people are wrestling with. And I'll give you an added example from Princeton University, that they're very proud of being Princetonian. One of the things that they do at the end of every year is have a parade with all of their alumni from as far back as you can imagine. They walk around in white and orange pinstripe suits. And the way the parade functions is that the eldest alumni are at the front, and then they have class years going all the way to the most recent alumni. And you have decades of classes that pass, and they're all elderly white men. In the midst of it, you might see some diversity, people of color, some women, but by the end, the most recent class years are still white males. One of the things that I participated in at Princeton that year was an unofficial baccalaureate ceremony that takes place on most college campuses called the Pan-African Baccalaureate, a graduation ceremony that's attended mostly by brown and black students, and of those mostly black and of those mostly African American. And the young woman who was the valedictorian of that ceremony, she said to her graduating peers and friends that assembled that we have to remember that just because we are at Princeton does not mean that we are of Princeton. And we shouldn't forget all the sacrifices and struggles that so many had to undertake in order for us to be where we are today. So our degrees, our credentials, the networks that we establish and build should never be for anything self-serving, but should always be for the common good and the advancement of our community on a whole. When these young people come to our center, they're every single day in institutions that were built to not cater to people like them. They go into classrooms and they suddenly represent 2 billion Muslims around the world. I have students who in the last month
study economics. And they walked into the classrooms that they teach economics, and the professor says to them as they walk in, "Explain to me what is happening in Iran." The kid has no idea what's happening. But just like every other moment where Islam factors into something, they now suddenly have to represent everything other than themselves. They come in with a lot of struggles, that this is a generation that is not at any fault of their own, inherited a technology that just endows them with anxiety. They have a distinct absence of really knowing how to interact with people in person, spending a good chunk of a formative period of their identity in a virtual mode of engagement due to a pandemic. Their understanding of religion is something that gets fairly limited because it's just do's and don'ts and rights and wrongs. There hasn't been a day in the last however many months where I haven't had at least a dozen people every single day reach out to talk about what it's been like for them to grow up in a house where they're abused, to talk about what it's been like for them to deal with just the fears that they have from not meeting their parents' expectations, to be in a place where they struggle to make decisions and choices, to try to figure out, why does Allah put me in these situations? And they have at least the benefit of a space to go to and people to talk to help them navigate it. Most young people don't have those places that they can go. And then they internalize it. They start to become a little bit distant from their faith. And then eventually they just lose their religion altogether. And the crisis isn't that, oh no, for the sake of Islam, we have to bring people back. Islam does not need us to do anything for it. It's great. But with a deep concern for that young person whose heart is precious and should never have to go through anything all alone, we have to build these types of spaces and institutions so that they have now an opportunity to confront what it is that's taking place. On our campus, they do something every year where they nominate and name the 10 most influential students. And out of 50,000 students, every year for the last decade, the 10 most influential on our campus, 1 out of or to 5 have been Muslim students. Because they don't live in a Muslim bubble. They feel empowered to go out and be a part of other parts of society. My student-based community every single year raises anywhere from $4 to $7 million to support people in need. They've helped to build a domestic violence shelter that is going to open in the next few weeks. They every week distribute food to 500 homeless people that live in the vicinity of our Islamic Center. They are this month raising money for both survivors of domestic violence as well as orphans around the world. They don't stop. They continue to move forward. They continue to grow because they come to a space that allows for them to feel safe. They learn to be motivated by their values and ethics, that their religion is just you come to a masjid and then you go out and then that's it, but it's transformational so that you bring change to the world. And they actually believe that they have something to offer. They believe that they can make a difference, that there's something that they can contribute, and that we let them be a part of the process. I'm not just throwing things at them. My job is not to be a glorified MSA president, but to tap into their creativity and let them see that their ideas can actually manifest in ways that they shouldn't be scared to dream. They can have aspirations and they can see that they have something to offer. They embrace their own luminosity. You see what I mean? I'm sorry, I know I talk a lot, and that was much longer than 5 minutes. I'm not saying it just because I work there. I'm telling you, as somebody who grew up in this country, went to a university in this country that did not have resources such as the ones that we provide,
I had this halal dining hall open, right? Chicago's not full. It's full of like all kinds of every single time I try to do something here, Muslims from everywhere are like, let's go out to eat. And they name 20 different places we can go in every 5-block radius of where we are. We took our students to this halal dining hall that's as big as this musalla. And they were literally in tears walking in. And it's not because they're gluttonous and they love to eat and they're so excited, but so many of them walk in and they say, you're telling me I can eat anything I want? And I said, yeah. And they say that there's nothing here that I have to be worried about. And their tears are because they don't go to spaces that were built primarily out of consideration for them so often. That they've gotten used to being an afterthought or a second option or not even an option at all. And those little things make a difference in building confidence that then we can say to them, hey, you know what? You're going to go and build now everything else that needs to be built.
All right, so we'll go ahead and conclude now. Thank you very much for your attention. Let us make a dua, and I'm going to make a dua in English because one of the things I tell parents at home, when you're creating a Muslim culture in your home and your children don't speak Arabic, it's okay as a way to make prayer meaningful and relevant to them to make dua in English and encourage them to also make a dua. That's not memorized. That's not simply repeating, but it's from the heart. Because it is through that example of you asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for what it is that you need, that they see your connection to God and you model for them how they can